First and foremost, what I want to address is that despite the very negative tone of this video, if you like Wanda, I understand. She's a very strong and convenient character, which makes her appealing, but that doesn't excuse her many flaws. She completely failed at what she was supposed to be, is plagued with perks I believe are very poorly implemented, and even caused issues upon her addition to the game. A couple of things in this video will be my personal opinion, and I also want to clarify that I absolutely do not like the character. So if you think I'm being biased, well, there you go. I also want to clarify that the negative opinions I harbor are also shared by many others, so I'm not just going on a rant, but rather exploring the causation behind a widespread distaste. However, what isn't subjective whatsoever is her failure to be a glass cannon. She failed at this goal so severely that some people don't even realize that was the entire idea behind the character. Developers have referred to her as a higher risk/reward character, and it's obvious what they were going for if you think about her age mechanic. Although it is becoming more and more accepted that she isn't, I still want to debunk this misconception. But if you're skeptical, my previous video was about proving this argument by tanking bosses as the character, to demonstrate that her low health is nowhere near severe enough to make her a glass cannon. The truth is, she's actually better at tanking than most characters, making her the exact opposite of what she was meant to be. The reason for this is a combination of her high damage, the potency of armors, and her very efficient healing. Using the alarming clock, her unique weapon, while old, gives her a DPS of 271. For reference, that is barely higher than Wolfgang with a Hambat. Yes, Wolfgang can go higher using a stronger weapon, but nonetheless, Wanda has high DPS. This enables her to be able to beat bosses faster, as such taking fewer hits and using less armor. Speaking of armor, it's the main reason why her low health doesn't matter. Armor in this game is simply very potent, increasing the amount of damage you can take by up to 20 times. For example, Dragonfly needs to land 10 hits on old Wanda for her to die. Yes, other characters can absorb a lot more hits using the same armor, but Wanda still has plenty of wiggle room for all practical purposes. To put it into numbers, old Wanda with knight armor, or a marble suit, effectively has 750 health, which is the same as Wilson with a football helmet. So if you think this is fragile, you must also think this is fragile. Even 90% damage reduction offers enough leverage. A fair argument you can make is that Wanda needs to get more expensive equipment in order to be able to comfortably take damage, but she has an easier time getting and using said equipment. Old Wanda suffers no passive sanity loss from Dreadstone and Knight Armor. It's also very easy to get Nightmare Fuel as her. Furthermore, her high damage greatly offsets the price of armor. Her healing is also extremely powerful, too powerful for it to be a downside. An Ageless Watch can be used every 2 minutes and heals 20 health, which means one gets you 80 health a day. With Wanda's natural health loss taken into account, a single watch gets you a net profit of 50 health. This is already very generous for day-to-day situations. Every single day, you could break 64% of a football helmet and still not suffer a net loss of health. Now, a second watch grants you a net gain of 130 health each day, and I don't think you realize just how absurd that is. That's more health than what an entire jelly bean gives. If you were to kill Bee Queen as often as physically possible, you'd still heal less than what Wanda gets for free. If you tried healing the same amount of health using pierogies, you'd end up wasting hunger from overeating. All that with just 2 watches. And there's absolutely nothing stopping you from getting however many you want. How is she supposed to be a high-risk character when you constantly get spoon-fed healing? And let's not forget that Wanda can repair Dreadstone armor without any repercussions. I think Wanda is the most inconsequential character to take damage with, since you have automatically restoring health and armor. Her health mechanic does also come with a downside. It takes a few seconds for her healing to take place, and if she takes damage within this time, the healing gets cancelled. This also means she can't heal while constantly taking damage, from things such as starvation and freezing. But let's not kid ourselves. For even just an intermediate player, these threats are basically non-existent. But how about in combat? Well, it takes less than 3 seconds for the healing to finish, which is faster than the attack speed of a lot of enemies. So this is just another slap on the wrist. Similarly to how taking damage cancels healing, healing can also cancel taking damage. This is a mechanic I paid no attention to in my run because it wasn't necessary, although I did inevitably perform it by accident. Despite my lack of experience with it, I'm sure you can get good value out of it done correctly, making Wanda's health management even easier. Really, the most credit I can give the character in terms of being difficult to play is that you need to get dual sight fragments in order to craft timepieces, which are used in making a lot of her unique items. Except this isn't actually difficult for someone mildly experienced. You start with 3 of these, alongside an ageless watch, which is extremely generous. This enables you to have up to 4 ageless watches before ever actually encountering any threats, which, you know, is only 290 health a day. It's safe to say this eliminates any difficulty the character could have had. But what if I spend my timepieces on an alarming clock instead? Well, it's easy to get more. You can get dual sight fragments from the archives, which is completely safe. Alternatively, you could unlock character switching, and by reselecting the character, you get 32 dual sight fragments worth of timepieces at the cost of a single Moonrock idol. Of course, the ruins are an option too, but those actually include dangers. So all that being said, Wanda is not for beginners who don't know how to do all that stuff. But if someone knows what they're doing, they can literally just walk in there completely uncontested. After doing so, she becomes incredibly easy to play, and the biggest challenge you have to face getting there is just killing nightmares. I've seen a few people set limitations for themselves regarding armor, healing, and weapons, with the intention of making the character harder to play. That's good and all, but that doesn't excuse that the character doesn't encourage doing that whatsoever. A lot of things in her kit encourage playing safe, such as her ability to inconsequentially use powerful armors, having a ranged weapon, being able to cancel damage after getting hit, and if all else fails, a way to get invincibility frames. If you need to set your own challenges to make a character what they were supposed to be in the first place, that just shows they're poorly designed. However, there is a big game changer, planar damage. Some argue that this killed the character because the alarming clock has no planar damage, thus being weaker, and also because planar armor isn't nearly as protective, making her actually fragile. But there really aren't any valid grievances. The Gloomerang and Scythe are both shadow weapons, meaning Wanda deals extra damage with them. Old Wanda can use the Gloomerang and maintain a safe distance, but is going melee while old Wanda too scary? Then be middle-aged instead. Middle-aged Wanda has a manageable amount of health and gets a 25% damage boost. While damage boosts are less effective on planar weapons, it's still more than what a lot of characters have to offer, especially considering that Wanda doesn't have a skill tree yet. If even middle-aged Wanda's health is too low, then be young. You get no extra damage, but you have the standard 150 health. So at the absolute very worst, Wanda is still on par with a base character. To argue that planar enemies killed her is utter lunacy. So to sum up this section, Wanda fails to be a glass cannon because of how powerful armor is and because her healing is just too good. She is much more forgiving with mistakes than most other characters, making her everything but hard to play. And that isn't necessarily an issue, The point was to talk about just how much she failed at her goal. But there is a consequence, which I assume is a product of trying to balance the character's non-existent downside. She has a lot of other perks outside her extremely powerful combat abilities. One of these perks is the Backtrack Watch, which I believe should have been made available to every character. The Backtrack Watch allows the player to teleport to a marked location on an 8-minute cooldown. This saves time on travel and can save you from sticky situations, but it's mostly a quality of life feature. It single-handedly makes Wanda a popular character for megabases, where many of these can be crafted. Don't feel like riding your beefalo for 3 minutes? Just teleport. Yes, it's very lazy, but in a megabase, those are the type of things you end up valuing. It's an item that gives a solution for a first world problem that every character faces. As I said, a quality of life item. As such, I think that locking it behind a character was a mistake, but I also think it's too late to go back on it. Clay has made it clear that they intend to give similar perks to more characters. I still hope that some method of instant travel is added that doesn't invalidate pre-existing ones, but from the start, this has gone in the wrong direction. On the other hand, there's an item I hope never becomes available to everyone: the alarming clock. Well, things like it already exist, but they're terrible so they don't count. Anyway, before ever even playing the character, I was very aware of her failure as a glass cannon. But something I didn't realize is just how boring the alarming clock is. Is calling it boring subjective? Yes. However, what's hard to debate is just how much it ruins so many interactions in the game. Here's a few examples. You can outrange a Celestial Champion attack in Phase 1 and be far enough away for it to not move in Phase 3. Crawling Horrors and Terror Claws can be killed without moving. Tree Guards can barely reach you. Claws cannot even initiate a single attack. Hordes of enemies such as spiders, monkeys, and hounds can be killed with barely any effort. Crab King Claws can be killed before they even reach you, and several creatures can be killed before they can even react. Even if the interaction isn't entirely undermined, it's still much easier than with a regular weapon. It's overwhelmingly obvious that things in the game weren't designed to be fought with such a weapon. One could argue that this is just my opinion, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that when a character ruins so many interactions, it's not a good thing. I want to reiterate that I'm aware of the character's popularity, and understand how some people enjoy the character for what it is. However, her being boring, largely due to the alarming clock, appears to be the consensus for most people. This also loops back to her failure as a high-skill character, with having just about every single interaction made easier. Another thing I found contributed to the character's boringness is that she provides no personal preference for players. Whether that be a weapon, armor, or healing, you just have an objectively superior option for each. And finally, my biggest problem with the character. She broke a few things upon being added to the game. When she was new, she could permanently stun lock some creatures, including bosses. This was because the alarming clock attacks at a different speed than other weapons, which somehow caused this. How did Clay fix this? Did they A. change the alarming clock, or B. fundamentally change the entire mechanic of stun locking to accommodate for this new character, which resulted in several mechanics being altered for the worse for everyone else? And believe it or not, they actually went with option B. This changed interactions with Pigman, McTusk, and similar creatures. Previously, they could get stun locked. This was a pretty inconsistent mechanic, since it was dependent on connection, but due to Wanda, it is gone for good. The second thing is that because of her, Claus can walk through his sack. Wanda could cheese him by moving the stagehand, and completely stop him from moving. To patch this, the collision of the sack was removed. Why does this matter? Getting Claus stuck on his sack was a method that could be used to dodge his phase 2 chomp attack. This was especially useful when having no speed boost. You could say, these changes are old, get over it, Claws isn't hard anyway, and those don't even matter much, and you'd be right. But for people like myself who experience these changes, and also dislike playing the character, it feels like her addition to the game did more harm than good. There are a few items I haven't mentioned yet, because I don't have any gripe with them. Well, I kinda do with the backstep watch. This is easily her most underwhelming item, but it can be used to make kiting easier, because sure, give the so-called high-skill character yet another safety net. In conclusion, Wanda utterly failed at being a high-risk, high-reward character, offers an uninteresting experience, and even damaged the game in a few ways. You may not agree that she's the worst designed character, and there are certainly other characters guilty of similar things, but I think it's undeniable that she has many issues.